Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Steve Kidd. I want to talk about being an author, not just any author, but a best-selling author and what that can do for your business. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks so much for having me, Alicia. I really appreciate it.
I kind of gave away a little bit about who you are and what you do. Can you take a few moments and share with our listeners a bit about your business, what it is that you specialize in, what it is that you do, kind of set the tone for what we're going to go into on today's episode?
I almost feel like I need to preface that with, well, I'm old. Okay. So get used to it. I have been in marketing space for a really long time. Ultimately, I'm a marketing company with a strong publishing division. We were a brick and mortar marketing company starting back in February of 1987. In internet space, literally before the internet existed. So we've been doing digital marketing for a little while, and we've done books almost exclusively and now totally exclusively since 2007. So we've been around the block a little bit, and we love helping people share their message with the world. I kind of ask people this question these days. I'll ask it to you. What would you do to save the world?
That is a really, really, really intense question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
everybody's going to answer it different.
Yeah.
So I know for myself, it is very much about inner transformation and empowerment and becoming a better version of yourself, because that has so many positive implications. It has a ripple effect. You know, we've all kind of heard of the butterfly effect, and we can see evidence of it in our life that when we're transforming ourselves and we're a good person, it has a positive influence on a lot of people. So now I'm guessing that that question is very heavily related to what you're helping your clients accomplish when they're they're creating their book, they're putting together this sort of gift that they're sharing with the world, if you will, through the medium of a book.
Absolutely. You see, here's the thing, and it kind of drives me crazy when I talk to most book related companies, especially traditional publishers, is most of them want to critique a person, judge whether or not what they're going to do is good enough or anybody will want it. And I take a totally opposite approach because I really believe each one of us on this earth is here for a reason. And it's a little bit more significant of a reason than just inhaling and exhaling and keeping the carbon dioxide to oxygen balance right. Um, and because of that, I love being in this space where I can help people take that uniqueness of who they are and making a difference for, even if it's just one person that you say the same thing they've heard a million times, but you say it in a way that they can hear it. That's just huge to that one person.
It's true. We do, in many cases, have a very unique path where there's a lot of crossover. You know, we're all ultimately reaching for a lot of the same things. We want to have a loving family. We want to have a healthy body. We've got a whole audience here of business owners. You know, they are in all different industries, and yet sort of all have this same goal: to bring more value into people's lives. And it's kind of like an inherent desire, I think, for most people to want to feel like they're fulfilling some type of purpose, that they are contributing in some way more than just being, a lump of breathing flesh, and kind of just a consumer, if you will, as opposed to giving value. When you're working with an author, whether they are aspiring or maybe even have put out other books before, how often do you find that message needs to be clarified before they kind of get further down the writing process? Or do you find that most people come to you, they already know exactly what they want to communicate, and you're just helping them put it out there?
Well, I mean, I've worked with so many people that I've definitely had it everywhere across the gambit of that. Most of us, all of us, I'll put myself in that court as well. The truth of the matter is that what we're really amazingly powerful at, we do it so well, and it's so easy for us that we tend to discount it. It wouldn't even be the thing we'd be thinking about writing our book about. We have a company, our company does XYZ, but we've not necessarily on a day-to-day basis really stopped to think, why is it that I do that? Why is this whatever it might be? And it could be, building spacely sprockets, to go back to the Jetsons from, when I was a kid, or it could be, working on the cure for cancer and everything in between. But it's really cool when you dig down with a person and find out, yeah, but why is that important to you? Can I use an example?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I always like to, because I raised 6 kids, some of the time I was a single parent and some of the time I was married. And I always like to use the example of telling your children to clean up their room, because and it was shocking to me to find out that there are some parents who don't tell their children to do that, because I was raised by a very neat and tidy mother, and I just thought every mom was like that. And then I married a lady whose mom was not like that at all. But the concept of telling your kid clean up their room has so many different reasons behind it, why that's important. And very few of us, I mean, there's a few exceptions, but very few of us are, if you will, nagging our children to clean up your room, because we just want to be horrible, horrendous nags on our children. There's a reason. It might be, we want them to learn a skill set. It might be because we were raised in a horribly dirty environment, and maybe it even triggers. I met one person who, literally had a mild PTSD event to things being out of place because of how awful the situation was growing up. And so there's different reasons. And then when we find out why are we saying that and what's behind it, there can be not only sometimes some healing that needs to happen, but it also tends to begin to lead us down towards really understanding who are we really and what's the passion behind that, whatever it is that we do that the world knows that we do.
There's an element in what you just shared that is so valuable, and it's often overlooked. Using your example, perfect example, with children, we're often as parents just sort of, given the orders or saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you got to brush your teeth. Well, why do you have to brush your teeth? And even as adults, I see that when we don't understand why we're supposed to do something, we don't grab a hold of it. It becomes unsustainable. We have a tendency to sort of rebel against it. But when we understand why, well, now there's more meaning in that activity. There's more meaning in that behavior. And when we're clearly communicating why, we get better results, whether it's with our children or our clients or our customers or our employees or whatever the case may be. Because let's face it, none of us just want to be somebody's servant, just doing things because somebody told us to. But when we understand why, now all of a sudden it becomes much more self-empowering.
Absolutely. I worked with an amazing lady, great, great trainer. And she used to always say, people would do just about anything you ask for from them if they understood why. And it's our responsibility as leaders to help them understand and be bought into the why for why we're asking them to do that. Because then we really get rid of most all of the pushback that we get from people typically.
So right now, I know there are people listening who would love to be an author. They've got a book inside of them. They've probably known it for a while, but they have all sorts of seemingly justifiable reasons
Mhm.
why they can't or they shouldn't or it's not the right time. And I really want to spend some time there because I know that just like we need to understand why we do something, sometimes we need to understand why we may not be doing something and why that's not really a justifiable reason so we can drop that excuse. So you're the perfect person to ask because I'm sure you've seen this given all the years that you've been in this industry. What are some of the things that are really tripping people up?
It starts from, and again, really why. Maybe I can even go another word and say who. Who is it for? Who's it going to affect? And there's two sides to that equation. Either A, we haven't taken any time to define who we want to talk to and who we're supposed to help, or B, it becomes overwhelming. We're doing something that's enormous. We know we could literally change the world with that thing that's inside of us. A lot of times when I come to authors, they have this message that's like a torch inside of them, but they know how impactful it could be and how much impact it could make on so many people. Becomes a barrier to them to being able to get it out because it's just overwhelming. And so, what I always, in that case, encourage people to do is just focus on just one person. If you were to help one person, that could be more than enough. And when we take the weight of the world off of our shoulders and we just simply reach out with a smile to somebody, that's a much more easy thing to do than to do it. And I would also say that right along with that is then understanding what can I do today versus what can I do this year? Which again, I mean, we've all been through so much the last couple of years that it's like we don't even know where the world will be in 6 months, let alone a year from now. It's too long to plan anymore. But what can I do while it's called today? And when we break it down to that and we make sure that we do something impactful and effective today, it will have an impact on tomorrow. But more importantly, that is really the only way we can really learn. So that's kind of the starting piece of it. I would say second to that is that we then take everything we've ever learned in the whole entire world and we try to dump it all into the one little thing that we're going to say. And that's again creates a whole nother level of overwhelm because it's like, oh, and then I got to tell them this. Oh, and I need to make sure I tell them that too. And and I forgot that whole story there. And so now I got to start all over again because I forgot to start them at and we just get so lost in it. So again, I always encourage people take one point, make it really clear, and then have a clear action that a person can take from that point. And then if there's a second point, because there will be, then that's a second book. And when we break it down to something that simple, it again becomes something that we can really handle. And then I'll give you a really practical, just how do you do that tip? Okay. Because everything else I've kind of talked about is more mindset. So now we've got the right mindset. What can I actually do? And that's where talking really comes into play. I encourage people to use speaking to write. Sir Richard Branson, actually, all of the books he's ever written, he's done all of them via speaking and being talking and being interviewed and those kind of things. And they've then been turned into books. And he's got several very large companies. It's a really impactful way. Beyond that, in addition to that, if you will, when we talk, we typically are focused on who we're talking to. You and I are having a conversation right now, and at least at the back of my mind, if not forefront of my mind, is I want to make sure you're understanding what I'm saying. I'll look at, you nodding your head or those kind of things. And if you're giving me that puzzled, like, I didn't understand a word of what you just said, look, then I want to stop and figure out, what did I say that was confusing? That's where talking is very powerful in communicating. Typically, when we write, and this is why journaling is so powerful, tends to be very internal. It's very cathartic. It's a great way to deal with your own stuff, but it typically ends up being all about you as opposed to about the person that you're trying to help. So I really, really strongly encourage you, whether you turn on a Zoom yourself and you interview yourself, or even better yet, get somebody, get on with somebody and have them ask you the questions and then talk and explain it and teach it to them.
I love that. I have to shift gears just a tiny bit
Yeah.
because when we first started the interview, I mentioned the value of being a best-selling author from a credibility perspective, from a business perspective. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing this because it's somewhat intuitive and yet maybe not as intuitive as we may expect. So from your perspective, I'd love to hear why having a bestseller status is so valuable as a business owner.
Absolutely. So, and not intending, but I will shamelessly plug my 20th book, Bestseller is Only the Beginning. Bestseller is really best thought of as a credential. It's a foundation. You know, if you're going to build a really great house, you want to have a really good foundation under the house. I use in the book the example of if you wanted to be a medical doctor, the first thing you have to do is graduate medical school. And what that means is you passed a test showing that you have a knowledge base of anatomy and physiology. Nobody's going to hand you a prescription pad and a scalpel and say, go start writing, prescriptions and cutting on people because you graduated from medical school. That's really just the certification that you know your stuff and you're now able to go and learn the doing part of it. And that's really what a bestseller really is. Now, I can tell you from a marketing standpoint, because ultimately I'm a marketing company, you will never maximize the marketing. I know that's a big statement, isn't it? You will never maximize the marketing of anything that you do if it isn't attached to a best-selling book or it's something that's being done by a best-selling author. I'll give you a statistic so that it doesn't just sound like I'm just mouthing off. What I know to be true, and I learned this actually from an insider in Hollywood, over 50% of all movies that get made are based off of best-selling books. And over 80% of them that win Academy Awards are based off of bestsellers. Bestseller is the number one influencer credential, bar none. I, in fact, have medical doctors, since I use that as an example, that'll be the first ones to tell you they get more out of using the credential of being a best-selling author than having been a doctor in their field for 20 plus years.
There's something psychologically powerful about that. And we tend to have those biases, whether we like it or not, whether they're true or not. When someone has certain credentials, there is an elevation of status in most people's minds. And being a best-selling author just happens to be one of those, especially when it comes to being a credible expert. And when we're doing business with someone, in many cases, we don't necessarily want to go to the newbie. We don't necessarily want to go to the part-timer. We don't want to go to the person who kind of has a 50-50 track record. We want to go to the people who demonstrate expertise, who seem like they're the best shot we've got at getting a good result or having a positive outcome. And when we're investing, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it's a service, if it's for your home, if it's for your body, if it is a product for your home or your body or your cat or your dog or whatever, you want some kind of sense of, I'm making a good decision here. So then for people who are saying to themselves, well, that's great and all, I get it. Intellectually, it makes all sorts of sense, but I don't know how. I can't imagine that my book could ever be a bestseller. I'd like to talk a little bit about the technical side of that and just kind of covering it, at a high level, more of an overview than getting into too much specifics. But I think that for the understanding, right, the why, how it works, we'll sort of bring it home for people.
Well, and I don't want to diminish anybody that is a best-selling author. Over 80% of all the people that you'll ever meet say they want to write a book. Less than 5% of them ever do. And of that 5%, if you make that 100% of the people that have written books, less than 5% of them ever make it on the bestseller list on Amazon at all. I will say I'm specifically talking about Amazon's bestseller list because of the fact that it's the only statistically driven list, meaning that when a book is at number 2 and another one's at number 3, that means the book at number 2 sold more copies of the book. Okay, so and that's important because, you know, like New York Times and others are more editorialized. They take some information and then they just say this is what we've deemed to be the list. We want something that's reliable. With that said, bestseller is a start. That's why I wrote the book Bestseller is only the beginning. Bestseller with the right marketing campaign is the day one effort for your book. Technically day 2 if you're talking international. Day 1 is US and day 2 would be your international statistics. But it's the thing that happens right up front. It is the validation of what you've written, and it is the beginning process of marketing that we then build everything else on. Because when you then go to market the book beyond that, if book sales is the point of your book, you want to be marketing the best-selling book, the number 1 international bestseller, versus spending years and years marketing a book to get to that. That's really where we start out at. And that's just a matter of understanding, number 1, Amazon is a search engine and you need to do the SEO for your book just like you would for a website so that it optimizes and is seen on the search engine that is called Amazon. And number 2 is that you have a marketing campaign in place that plays directly into the algorithm of Amazon, and you know, it gets that done for you. So did that answer your question, or did we want to go deeper?
Well, I think it is a really good introduction for people. I know early on in my first couple of books, they were more just, let's write a book because it's what you're supposed to do, right? I'm going to write a book. My first book was about hypnosis because at the time I was predominantly known for and focused on being a hypnotherapist. And then my second book sort of was an evolution that followed the evolution of my business, the outside the box entrepreneur. And so got into a little bit more of the lifestyle side of being a business owner. And it kind of showed my evolution as a coach and consultant and what I was doing with clients, but they all were sort of centric to, right, marketing my business. And I really didn't have any idea, you know, this concept of best-selling author, just it wasn't even on my radar. Well, fast forward then, participating in some other projects and becoming an international bestseller. And then my most recent book, which I said, you know, let's go for it. Let's make it a bestseller. And I was pleasantly surprised at actually just how easy it is when you know what to do, when you have the marketing side of things in place. And the reason I share that is because I know that I'm not alone in thinking, as I did once upon a time, that it is so hard to get to bestseller status. There's a formula, there's a strategy, there's a way to do it. Just like, you know, there's a way to do surgery on your heart. There's a way to, you know, diagnose what's wrong with your car. There's a way to do it. And when you have an individual like yourself, a company like you have, obviously it takes a lot of the pressure off of the individual to try to figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you're accidentally the person who tells a child that there is no such thing as Santa Claus, that mom and dad put the presents under the tree. It's kind of that same kind of thing because it is really a system and it's about following the system. I mean, it is about keeping up with Amazon because they keep changing their algorithm to try to mess with us. But, you know, when we do it every day, we just roll with it and keep it going. And you know, now what is it now? Gee, 16, 17 years later, 4,000 plus people that I've worked with, all the way from, I don't have a clue what I'm going to write to, my book's 20 years old. And every single one of them is bestsellers. I have 100% success rate. And that's really what it is just following the system and knowing what it takes. And then putting the marketing behind it to make that happen.
One of the things that I want to make sure we squeeze in, I know we're at the end of time, but I just got to squeeze this in, is your own journey as an entrepreneur. You've been doing this a long time, so I'm sure you've had to work through some of your own mindset stuff. And I'm curious if there is maybe one thing that you could pick out of all of them that was really a tripping point for you that you had to work through and overcome in order to get to where you are today.
Oh, absolutely. I was raised in a pastor's home. My dad was a pastor my whole life. And there's kind of prevalent attitude, especially towards people in ministry, that you're not supposed to make money, that there's something holy about being broke. And some of the mindsets that I had around money, I would talk about them very matter-of-factly and tell stories, and people would say to me, it's like, that's not normal, right? And I was like, well, isn't that how everybody was? And so I've really had to, I'll even go so far as to say I'm still working through the concept of really understanding my own personal value, and how important it is to have enough money to be able to do the kind of things. Because let's face it, money gets a bad rap, money is the root of all evil, that kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is, good people with more money will do even more good.
So true. And I'm sure almost everyone listening can relate to that to some degree, because many of us did not grow up in affluent homes where money had sort of a positive connotation. And what do people do when they're struggling? Oftentimes they find ways to justify feeling better about their circumstances. And so I remember very, very vividly some of the things that my mother would say, just angry things about people who, grew up with the silver spoon and those types of things. And that is stuff that gets impressed upon us. And it may not even be conscious in some cases, because a part of you is saying, well, I don't want my mom to think that way about me if I have money, or whatever your circumstances were. And so I find that confusion around money and money shame, it goes all the way from the bottom up to the top in terms of where people are financially. Even some of my clients who have a lot of money, they're secretly ashamed. They don't want their family to feel bad around them or to judge them. I mean, it's everywhere. It's just one of those things that we all have to do our work on, because let's face it, money's probably not going away anytime soon. And it is how we function through our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, this has been a great conversation. I know we just scratched the surface on the topic. I want to make sure our listeners know how they can get in contact with you, because I'm sure there are some people listening right now who are like, you know what? This is a sign from the divine that I'm ready. Let's do this. So how can our listeners find you and connect with you?
So, on just about any of your social medias, I am Steve Kidd, or Ask Steve Kidd, AskSteveKidd. But to make it even easier for you, I got a free gift for you. I hope everybody will go get it. If you go to ongoingwealthguide.com, it's a simple 5-step little PDF I put together so that no matter what the bank account might look like today, you have a system to be able to generate abundance in your life. Both the mindset of knowing, hey, I may have just spent money on things yesterday, but that doesn't mean I'm never going to have money in the bank account again, as well as knowing how to be able to do that. That's yours free, ongoingwealthguide.com. And I even added to the pot that when you get to the thank you page from that, there's a link there. You can schedule 15 free minutes to talk to me about your book or your marketing or anything I can do to help you with. And that's just my additional free gift to you. So I hope everybody will go to ongoingwealthguide.com and get that free gift.
Awesome. This has been great, Steve. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you to all of our listeners. You know, we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.